Sam Harris had been riding for hours across the wide-open Arizona desert, the sun beating down relentlessly, casting shadows on the dry, cracked earth beneath his horse's hooves. His face, weathered from years of work under the scorching sun, showed little emotion. He had seen it all: the dust storms, the long cattle drives, and the loneliness that came with being a cowboy. Sam had never minded the solitude. In fact, he had grown used to it. After all, his life had been one of hard work, and that suited him just fine. He had no reason to look back, but today something felt different. The desert, which had always been so quiet, seemed to whisper a story he had long forgotten. The wind carried the faint smell of sagebrush, but there was something else in the air, a feeling he couldn't quite put his finger on. Sam pulled his hat down lower over his brow and urged his horse forward. He had a job to do, and he wasn't one to waste time on distractions, but still the feeling tugged at him, like a distant memory that refused to be forgotten. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sam spotted a small group of figures in the distance. His hand instinctively moved to the rifle slung over his shoulder. It wasn't unusual to see other travelers in the desert, but this group seemed different. There were no signs of cattle or wagons, and they moved with a kind of purpose that suggested they weren't just passing through. Sam squinted, trying to make out who they were. As he drew closer, he saw them clearly. They were Apache. Sam's heart skipped a beat. The Apache were a proud people, and their presence in these parts was not something to be taken lightly. Tension had always simmered between the Apache and settlers, and the scars of past conflicts ran deep. Sam had seen it all before: the raids, the violence, the fear. He'd never had much contact with the Apache, but he knew enough to be cautious. But as Sam's horse moved closer, one figure stepped forward from the group. She was a woman, tall and striking, with long black hair that flowed in the wind. Her eyes, dark as the night, fixed on Sam, and something about her looked familiar. At first, he couldn't place it. She was dressed in the traditional clothing of the Apache, her body language calm but alert, as if she were ready for anything. Sam pulled his horse to a halt and watched her. The woman took a few more steps forward, never breaking eye contact. Then unexpectedly she called out, her voice carrying across the desert, "Cowboy, don't you remember me? I'm your childhood love." Sam froze. His heart seemed to stop for a moment, and a flood of memories came rushing back. The words childhood love echoed in his mind, and he felt a rush of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and something else. He searched her face, trying to make sense of it all. How could this be? This woman, standing in front of him, was someone he had known as a child, long before the world had changed. The woman smiled faintly, her eyes filled with recognition. "It's me, Alia," she said, her voice softening. "Don't you remember? We used to play together. We were just kids back then." Sam's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of a past that seemed so distant now. Alia. The name stirred something in him, a faint memory of a time when life had been simpler. Before the war between settlers and the Apache, before families were torn apart by violence and hatred, he remembered a girl with laughing eyes and an easy smile, a girl he had spent countless afternoons with, running through the fields, playing near the river, and sharing secrets. But that was so long ago. The world had changed. They had changed. Sam couldn't believe what he was hearing. The girl he had once known, the girl he had once cared for, was standing right in front of him, grown into a woman, and now part of the Apache tribe. How could this be? What had happened to her? What had happened to him? The years between them seemed like a lifetime. Alia, sensing his hesitation, took another step closer, her gaze never leaving his. "I know it's been a long time," she said, her voice almost tender now. "But I've never forgotten you. I've thought about you all these years. I used to wonder what happened to you." Sam's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. He had thought about Alia too, many times over the years. But it had been so long and so much had happened since then. How could he even begin to make sense of everything? He cleared his throat, trying to steady his nerves. "Alia," he said slowly, his voice rough. I don't know what to say. It's been so long. I never thought I'd see you again." Alia smiled softly. "I never thought I'd see you either," she said. "But here you are in the same desert where we used to play. I've been following the same trail you left behind all those years ago." Sam's heart ached as memories of their childhood flooded back. They had been inseparable, always laughing and exploring together, sharing everything from wild dreams to fears about the future. But all of that changed when the violence between settlers and the Apache reached a boiling point. Families were torn apart. People they had once known as friends became enemies. Sam's family had been caught in the conflict, and soon they had to leave everything behind, fleeing the violence that consumed the land. Alia and her family had disappeared into the Apache camps, and Sam had lost contact with her. For years, Sam had pushed the memories of Alia aside, burying them deep within him. He had become a cowboy, focusing on survival and the harsh reality of life on the frontier. But now, standing before him was the girl he had once loved, the girl who had been taken from him by the cruelty of war and time. Alia reached out, her fingers brushing against Sam's arm, bringing him back to the present. "I've missed you," she said quietly, "but I'm not the same girl I was. And you're not the same boy." Sam looked at her, his heart heavy. "No," he said, shaking his head. "We're not. But we don't have to be." For a long moment the two stood there in the fading light, the desert around them silent as if holding its breath. Sam could feel the weight of everything between them, the years, the pain, the loss. But there was something else too, a spark, a hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way back to what they had once shared, despite the world that had torn them apart. Finally, Sam spoke. "What do we do now?" Alia smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Now we talk. And you remember." And so the two of them sat together as the sun sank lower and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. For the first time in years, Sam felt a sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but for now, it felt good to remember the past, to reconnect with someone who had once been his whole world. As the night deepened, Sam and Alia shared stories of their lives since they had last seen each other. The desert seemed to listen, the winds carrying their words across the wide open spaces, as if the land itself had witnessed the reunion of two souls who had once been lost, but had now found their way back to each other. As the evening settled into night, the fire crackled between Sam and Alia, casting flickering shadows on the desert ground. Sam's horse was tethered nearby, and the soft sounds of the wilderness filled the air around them. They sat together in silence for a moment, both unsure of how to begin after so many years. The memories of their childhood, buried deep in their hearts, had suddenly resurfaced, and now they had to navigate the strange distance that had grown between them over time. Alia was the first to speak, her voice gentle, yet filled with emotion. "I know this is hard for you, Sam, but I've carried the memory of our time together for so long, hoping that one day we might cross paths again." She paused, her eyes searching his face for any sign of recognition, of the boy she had once known. "I remember you as a kind, brave boy. You were always the one who made me laugh, who made everything seem like it would be okay, even in the toughest of times. And now you're here, a cowboy in the same desert where we used to play." Sam looked down at the fire, feeling the weight of her words. He had changed so much since those carefree days when they had run through the fields together, unaware of the challenges and hardships that lay ahead. The world had been different back then. They had been different. But hearing Alia speak of those times brought back a flood of memories he hadn't even realized he'd been holding on to. "I remember those days too," Sam said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "We used to race each other to the river, and you always beat me. You were faster than I was, even back then." He chuckled softly, but the laughter was tinged with sadness. "I never thought I'd see you again, Alia. Not after everything that happened. Not after—" He trailed off, not sure how to put his feelings into words. He didn't want to revisit the pain of the past, but the truth was that their childhood had been cut short by the violence between settlers and the Apache. Families had been torn apart. Friendships had been shattered. And in the end, Sam's family had moved away, leaving behind the home he had grown up in and the girl he had once shared his heart with. Alia, sensing his hesitation, reached out and gently touched his arm. "You don't have to explain, Sam, I understand. I know how much pain there is in your heart. I've felt it too. I know what it's like to lose everything, your family, your home, the people you love. It changes you. It makes you hard. But it doesn't mean you have to forget." Her words hit Sam harder than he expected. For years he had buried his memories of her, his memories of the time before everything fell apart. But now, hearing Alia speak of the pain she had experienced, Sam felt a deep sense of guilt. He hadn't forgotten her, but he had pushed her and everything related to their childhood out of his mind, thinking that if he didn't remember, the pain wouldn't be so real. But here she was, reminding him of everything he had lost, the love, the innocence, and the hope they had once shared. "I never wanted to forget you, Alia," Sam said, his voice rough. "But after everything that happened, I had to move on. I had to survive. I couldn't afford to hold on to the past." Alia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know. I had to do the same. After I was taken in by the Apache, I had no choice but to survive. The life I knew was gone, and I had to adapt. I became one of them. I became part of a tribe that had its own traditions, its own way of life. It wasn't easy, but it was what I had to do." Sam listened intently as Alia spoke, her voice steady but filled with the weight of years of hardship. She told him how, after their separation, she had been taken by the Apache and raised among them. She had learned their ways, how to survive in the desert, how to live in harmony with the land, and how to fight when necessary. It was a hard life, but it was her life now. The Apache had become her family, and they had taught her to survive in a world that was often hostile and unforgiving. "There were times when I thought of you," Alia continued, her eyes distant as she recalled the past. "Times when I would sit by the fire, and I would remember those days when we were children before everything changed. I would wonder if you were out there somewhere, if you were okay. But then the years passed and I realized that the world we had known was gone. I had to move forward, even if it meant leaving behind everything I once knew." Sam could hear the sadness in her voice, but there was something else too, a strength, a resilience that he admired. He had always known Alia to be strong, even as a child. But now, seeing her as an adult, he realized just how much she had grown. She was no longer the carefree girl he had known. She was a warrior, a survivor, and someone who had endured more than Sam could imagine. "And what about you?" Alia asked, her gaze steady. "How did you survive all these years? I know you left your home just like I did. You must have had your own struggles." Sam leaned back against a rock, looking up at the night sky. He had always been the quiet one, the one who didn't share much about himself. But something about being with Alia made him feel as if it was okay to open up, to talk about the things he had kept hidden for so long. "I've done what I had to do," he said, his voice low. "Worked on ranches, drove cattle, lived a life that was as simple as it could be. I thought if I kept working, kept moving, then I wouldn't have to think about the things I lost. But it wasn't enough. Nothing ever is. And now here I am, still trying to figure out who I am, who I was meant to be. I don't know what's next, but I don't know what to do with the feelings you've stirred in me." Alia's eyes softened and she reached out, placing her hand gently on his. "You don't have to know everything, Sam. Sometimes all you can do is take one step at a time and trust that things will work out. We've both lost so much, but that doesn't mean we can't find a way forward." Sam looked into her eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He didn't want to lose Alia again. They had been brought together by fate, and maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to heal the wounds of the past, together. As the fire burned down to embers, Sam and Alia continued to talk, sharing stories of their lives since they had last seen each other. It was a slow, painful process, but it felt good to finally speak openly, to finally connect with someone who understood the pain and the struggle. The stars above them sparkled in the dark desert sky, and for that moment Sam felt as though the weight of the world had lifted, even if just for a little while. As the days passed, Sam found himself meeting Alia more often. They would sit by the fire at night sharing stories, their voices blending with the quiet whispers of the desert winds. There was a comfort in their conversations, even though they both knew that the world around them had changed. The past, with all its joy and sorrow, was something they couldn't ignore. It was there between every word and every glance, like a shadow they couldn't escape. Despite their growing closeness, the reality of the situation kept pressing in. Sam's life was tied to the world of settlers, cattle drives, and the harsh life of a cowboy. He had spent years building a life in the wilderness, far from the chaos of the cities, but also far from the people he had once known. He had learned to live with the pain of losing his family and the relationships that had been severed by time and violence. But now, with Alia back in his life, he couldn't help but feel torn between his old world and the new one she represented. Alia, on the other hand, had found a place among her people. She was no longer the girl Sam had once known. She was now a respected member of the Apache tribe, a warrior who had learned to survive in the unforgiving desert. Her life was shaped by the values of her tribe: strength, resilience, and loyalty to the people who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go. But even though she had become a part of the Apache, her memories of Sam had never truly faded. She had always held on to the hope that they might meet again, even when it seemed impossible. One morning, as the sun rose over the desert, Sam and Alia sat atop a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of land. The air was cool and the sky was clear, with only a few wisps of clouds scattered across the horizon. Alia was quiet, her gaze fixed on the distant hills, her thoughts far away. Sam noticed the change in her demeanor and knew that something was troubling her. "What's on your mind?" Sam asked gently, breaking the silence. Alia turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "I've been thinking about the future," she said softly. "I know that things have changed between us. The world has changed. But I don't know if we can ever truly go back to the way things were. There's too much history, too much pain between our people. I don't want you to think that everything is as simple as it might seem." Sam felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew what she was saying was true. He could feel the tension between their worlds, the weight of the years that had passed and the conflict that had defined their lives. It wasn't just their relationship that had been affected. It was the very fabric of the world they lived in. The settlers and the Apache had been at odds for as long as anyone could remember. It wasn't something that could be undone by just a few shared moments and conversations. "I know," Sam said quietly, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "It's not easy. It's never been easy. But sometimes I wonder if things could change. If people could change. I don't know if we'll ever be able to fix everything, but maybe we can find a way to build something better." Alia's eyes softened as she looked at him. "I hope so, Sam, I really do. But we both know how dangerous it is to hope for something we may never have. I've seen too much in my life to believe that peace is possible for everyone. The anger between our people runs too deep." Sam nodded, understanding the weight of her words. It was true. The history between the settlers and the Apache was filled with violence and distrust. Their ancestors had fought battles, lost loved ones, and built walls between them that seemed impossible to break down. But Sam also knew that the world was changing, slowly but surely. People were beginning to understand that there had to be a way to live together, to share the land, without continuing the cycle of violence. "I don't know what the answer is, Alia," Sam said, his voice steady. "But I don't want to sit by and let the same things happen over and over again. I want to find a way to make things better, even if it's just for us." Alia looked at him, her expression filled with a mixture of admiration and sorrow. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that things could change, but she had seen too much in her life to think that anything would ever be simple again. The two of them sat in silence for a while, watching the desert stretch out before them. The vastness of the land seemed to remind them of the challenges ahead. The desert was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving, just like the world they lived in. As the day wore on, Sam couldn't help but feel the weight of their situation. There were too many forces at play, too many different interests, too many old wounds that had never healed. He had grown up in a world that saw the Apache as the enemy, and now, after all these years, he was sitting next to one, talking about the possibility of peace. It seemed almost impossible, but there was something about Alia that made him believe. She wasn't just any Apache woman. She was the girl he had loved as a child, the girl who had been torn from him by fate and circumstance, and now, standing together in the desert, they were trying to find their way back to each other, despite everything that had come between them. "I don't know what the future holds," Sam said, breaking the silence once more. "But I know this, I don't want to let you go again. I won't let the world tear us apart." Alia's eyes glistened in the fading light, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. "I don't want to let you go either, Sam," she said softly. "But we both have to understand the consequences. The world may not be ready for what we're trying to do." Sam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. The world wasn't ready. There were too many people who would never accept their relationship, too many who saw the Apache as nothing more than enemies. But Sam had never been one to back down from a challenge. If he had learned anything in his life, it was that nothing worth having came easily. "I don't care what the world thinks," Sam said firmly. "I've spent too much time running from the things that matter. It's time to face the truth. It's time to do something that matters." Alia studied him for a long moment as if weighing his words carefully. Finally she nodded, a sense of resolve settling over her. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. "Maybe we can change something, even if it's just one person at a time. Maybe we can start with us." The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the desert floor. The fire between them still burned brightly, but it was the fire in their hearts that kept them warm. They didn't have all the answers, and they knew that the road ahead would be difficult. But for the first time in years, they felt like they were on the same path, a path that could lead to something more, something better, even in the face of all the obstacles that lay before them. Days passed, and the quiet peace Sam and Alia had found in each other's company began to feel fragile. While the two of them had rekindled the bond they shared in their childhood, the reality of the world around them remained ever present. Sam had become increasingly aware of the risk they were taking by continuing to meet. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that their secret connection wasn't something they could keep hidden forever. In a land filled with distrust, old wounds, and the ever-looming threat of violence, their relationship was not only difficult to accept, it was dangerous. Sam had already begun to notice the tension in his interactions with others. The men at the local ranch were beginning to whisper, casting sideways glances his way whenever he entered town. They had always known him as a quiet cowboy, someone who kept to himself. But now he couldn't help but wonder if his new attachment to Alia had begun to reach the wrong ears. One afternoon, as Sam returned from a long day of rounding up cattle, he saw a familiar figure standing by the edge of his camp. The silhouette was outlined by the setting sun, and as he drew closer, he recognized the person immediately. It was Sheriff Duncan, a man Sam had known for years. Duncan had always been a hard man, strict in his ways, and he had no love for the Apache. The sheriff had been in charge of maintaining law and order, though to many his methods were harsh, especially when it came to dealing with native tribes. Sam's stomach churned with unease as he approached the sheriff. The man had never been one to beat around the bush. "Evening, Harris," Duncan called out gruffly, his eyes narrowing as Sam came closer. "Got a minute?" Sam nodded but kept his distance, sensing that this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. "What's on your mind, Sheriff?" Duncan's steely eyes fixed on him, his expression hard. "I've been hearing things," he said, his voice low and serious. "Word is that you've been seen with an Apache woman. I don't know what's going on, but I don't like it." Sam's heart sank, but he kept his voice steady. "I don't know what you've heard, Duncan, but there's nothing to it." The sheriff took a step closer, lowering his voice even further. "You might not think it's a big deal, but I've seen it happen before. I've seen men get too friendly with the Apache, and we both know how that ends. These people can't be trusted, Harris. You can't be seen talking to one of them and expect things to stay quiet. It'll bring trouble, and not just for you." Sam took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. The sheriff was right about one thing. The tension between settlers and the Apache was always simmering beneath the surface. Any alliance between them would be seen as a betrayal by most of the town. He had seen it before. Apache women who tried to live peacefully among settlers were met with suspicion and hostility, often treated as enemies no matter their intentions. "I'm not trying to make trouble, Sheriff," Sam replied, his tone firm but calm. "I'm just talking to an old friend." "That's all?" Duncan's eyes narrowed further, and he took another step forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You'd better keep your distance from her, Harris. If I find out you're still meeting with her, I won't hesitate to report it. You know I can't ignore something like that." Sam felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, but he kept it under control. He wasn't a man who liked to back down, but he also knew better than to escalate things with a man like Duncan. The sheriff had too much influence, and angering him could cause problems not just for Sam, but for everyone around him. "I'll take care of it, Sheriff," Sam said, his voice cold and measured. "You don't need to worry." Duncan didn't seem entirely satisfied, but he nodded and turned to leave. "I'll be keeping my eye on you, Harris. Don't forget that." Sam watched the sheriff walk off, his heart heavy with the weight of the conversation. He couldn't afford to ignore Duncan's warning, but he also couldn't just walk away from Alia. She had become a part of him again, someone he couldn't easily let go of. No matter how much danger it brought, he knew deep down that he had to find a way to protect her, just as she had been there for him. Later that night, as the stars lit up the desert sky, Sam made his way to the place where he and Alia had met several times before, a quiet spot near the river, hidden away from prying eyes. Alia was already there, sitting on a rock by the water, her dark eyes reflecting the light of the moon. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, a small, relieved smile spreading across her face. "Sam," she said softly, standing up to greet him. I was starting to worry. Sam walked over to her, his face serious. "We need to talk." Alia's expression shifted, sensing the tension in his voice. "What's wrong?" Sam looked around, making sure no one was watching, and then spoke in a low voice. "Sheriff Duncan knows about us. He's warned me to stay away from you. Says it's too dangerous for both of us." Alia's face fell, her eyes darkening with concern. "I knew it was only a matter of time before someone found out. But what will you do? Will you stop coming to see me?" Sam shook his head, his jaw tight. "I don't want to. I can't. But the sheriff isn't the only problem. If the rest of the town finds out, it could be worse. They'll see me as a traitor and they won't hesitate to act." Alia stood in silence for a moment, her mind working quickly. "Then we have to be careful. We can't let anyone know what we've been doing." "Not yet, it's too risky. But I won't run away, Sam, not again. I've spent too many years running. This is my home now, and I won't leave it." Sam met her gaze, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He knew she was right. They couldn't afford to be careless. The world around them wasn't ready for the change they wanted to see. But that didn't mean they couldn't still try. They just had to be smarter about it. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, Alia," Sam said, his voice firm. "I won't let anyone hurt you." "Not again." Alia smiled faintly, her hand brushing against his. "We'll figure this out. Together." As they stood there by the river, the cool night air around them, Sam felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, and the dangers were real, but he wasn't going to back down. They had already come this far. He couldn't walk away now. The rest of the night was spent in quiet conversation, planning their next steps. They knew they had to be careful, but they also knew they couldn't let fear control them. They had a chance at something real, something worth fighting for. And no matter how hard the road ahead might be, Sam wasn't about to let it slip away. The days following their quiet meeting by the river were filled with tension. Sam and Alia both knew that the danger was growing with each passing moment. The sheriff had made it clear that he was watching Sam closely, and rumors about the two of them had begun to spread among the settlers. Sam's loyalty to his people and his love for Alia were on a collision course, and no matter how hard he tried to balance the two, the weight of the situation seemed to grow heavier by the day. Alia, too, felt the pressure building. The Apache were a proud people, and while many of them had accepted her as one of their own, they were still wary of outsiders, especially settlers. She had seen the distrust in their eyes whenever she returned to the camp after meeting Sam. She could sense that her tribe was beginning to question her loyalty. If they discovered that she had been secretly meeting with a settler, someone from the very people who had wronged her tribe for years, it could have disastrous consequences. She didn't want to lose the only family she had left. Despite all the dangers, there was a part of her that was unwilling to let go of what she and Sam shared. The connection they had rekindled was rare, something neither of them had ever expected to find again. But as much as they tried to deny it, they both knew that their love for each other had not disappeared over the years. It had only grown stronger, fueled by the hope of something better. One morning, as Sam rode out to check on his cattle, a sudden, sharp feeling of unease washed over him. The land seemed too quiet, the air too still. He had been around long enough to recognize when something wasn't right. Sam urged his horse forward, scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. As he neared the edge of his camp, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A group of men, including Sheriff Duncan, were waiting for him. They were standing in a tight formation, their faces hard and unreadable. Sam's heart raced as he reined in his horse, coming to a stop in front of them. "Sam Harris," Sheriff Duncan said, his voice cold and steady. "You've been seen meeting with an Apache woman. We've had enough of this. We're here to tell you that we won't stand for it anymore." Sam's mind raced. He knew this day would come, but he had hoped it would be later, that they would have more time to figure things out. But now there was no denying it. The sheriff and his men had finally decided to take matters into their own hands. "I'm not doing anything wrong, Duncan," Sam said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm just talking to an old friend. That's all." Sheriff Duncan's eyes hardened. Friend? You're calling her a friend after everything your people have done to the Apache? You think you can just walk away from all the hatred and violence because you're feeling nostalgic for a time that doesn't exist anymore? You're a fool, Harris. Sam clenched his fists, his anger rising, but he knew he had to keep his cool. The situation was too volatile to let his emotions take over. I don't need you to tell me what's right and wrong, Duncan. You don't know anything about what I've been through, what Alia's been through. We've both lost everything. We've both paid the price for the things that happened. The sheriff didn't seem moved. You're forgetting who you're dealing with, Harris. You're not just a cowboy anymore. You're a traitor, and we don't have any room for traitors in this town. Sam's heart raced as he realized that the sheriff was right. To most people in town, he was a traitor now.
He had crossed a line, and there would be no going back.
But Sam wasn't going to back down. Not now, not when things had already gone so far. He had made a promise to Alia, a promise to protect her and to try and build something better between their people. He couldn't let that slip away because of fear. I'm not a traitor, Sheriff, Sam said, his voice steady. I'm a man who's trying to do the right thing. And I won't apologize for it. Sheriff Duncan's face twisted in anger. This is your last warning, Harris, he growled. Stay away from the Apache woman or there will be consequences. We'll handle it our way and you won't like it. Sam knew the sheriff wasn't bluffing. The threat was real, and it could mean trouble for Alia and for him. But in that moment, Sam realized something. He couldn't live his life in fear. He couldn't keep running from what he knew was right, no matter the consequences. I'm not afraid of you, Duncan, Sam said, his voice calm but resolute. You do what you have to do, but I won't stop seeing her. Sheriff Duncan's eyes narrowed, and he motioned for his men to follow him. You'll regret this, Harris. You'll see. As the group walked away, Sam stood still, watching them disappear into the distance. His heart was heavy with the weight of the decision he had just made. He knew that this wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The sheriff wouldn't give up easily, and the town wouldn't forget what he had done. But Sam also knew that he couldn't back down. He had already made up his mind. Later that evening, as Sam made his way to the river to meet Alia, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. His world, which had always been defined by quiet routines and hard work, was now a world of danger and uncertainty. But despite the fear and the pressure, he couldn't deny that the love he felt for Alia gave him a sense of purpose. She was everything he had been searching for, someone who understood the pain and the loss, someone who saw him for who he truly was, not just the man others wanted him to be. When Sam reached the riverbank, he saw Alia sitting by the water, her face turned toward the sky. She looked serene, but Sam could see the concern in her eyes as he approached. Alia, Sam said softly, kneeling beside her. It's getting worse. The sheriff's men know about us now. They're threatening to make trouble. Alia looked at him with a mixture of sadness and determination. I knew it would come to this. We can't live in hiding forever, Sam. The world isn't ready for what we want, but that doesn't mean we can't try to make it better. We can't keep running. Sam took her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch, and he nodded. I don't want to run anymore either, but I can't let anything happen to you. You're my everything, Alia, and I won't let anyone take that from me. Alia's eyes softened, and she stood up, taking his hand in both of hers. We'll face whatever comes together, Sam. I don't care what anyone else thinks. As long as we have each other, we can find a way forward. Sam gazed at her, his heart swelling with love and resolve. For the first time in years, he felt truly certain of one thing. He had found something worth fighting for. The battle ahead would be difficult, and they would face many challenges. The road to peace, to a future where their love could exist without fear, would not be easy, but Sam and Alia were no strangers to hardship. They had been through too much to let anything, whether it was the sheriff, the town, or the world around them, stand in their way, and so they stood together by the river, united in their love and their resolve to fight for a future that was theirs. No matter what the world threw their way, they knew that their love could survive. It had survived the past, and it would survive whatever came next.